Today, we're diving into one of the most intense and complex periods of the 20th century, the Cold War. A global standoff between two superpowers, the United States and the Soviet Union, that shaped the world we live in today. From espionage and nuclear brinkmanship to ideological battles and the space race, we're unpacking it all. So grab a seat and let's explore the shadowy chessboard of global politics that defined an era. Let's get into it. As the clock ticked into the early 1960s, the world was embroiled in a conflict unlike any other. This was the Cold War, a standoff between two superpowers, the United States and the Soviet Union, locked in an ideological battle that would shape decades to come. The Cold War was a war that never happened in the traditional sense. No armies clashed on vast battlefields. No cities were razed to the ground. Yet it was a conflict that held the world in its grip and changed everything. The stage for the Cold War was set in the aftermath of World War II, where opposing ideologies began to carve up the globe. On one side stood the United States, bastion of capitalism and democracy. On the other, the Soviet Union, championing communism and state control. The allies of yesterday found themselves pitted against each other, their former collaboration buried under rhetoric and nuclear arsenals. In the West, the fear of communism spread like wildfire. Children were taught to duck and cover, as nuclear drills became a routine part of school life. The Iron Curtain, a term popularized by Winston Churchill, symbolized the descent of Eastern Europe into Soviet influence, cutting it off from the rest of the West. Spy networks became intricate chessboards for both superpowers. Agents and double agents moved through the shadows in Berlin, Moscow, and Washington, trying to outmaneuver each other. The era was immortalized by the race to space, as both nations sought to prove superiority through technological prowess. One of the most perilous moments came with the Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962. The world held its breath as the United States discovered Soviet missiles stationed in Cuba, just 90 miles off its coast. This was the closest the Cold War came to a hot conflict, with nuclear weapons poised for launch on both sides. Yet, through delicate diplomacy and the willingness to step back from the brink, catastrophe was averted. The Cold War's influence was felt globally, from proxy wars in Korea and Vietnam to the arms race that spiraled defense budgets skyward. Economies, politics, and societies were reshaped as the rivalry pushed for advancements that spilled over into civilian life, from technology to culture. Ultimately, the Cold War ended not with a bang, but a whimper as the Soviet Union dissolved in 1991. The walls of division, both literal and metaphorical, came down, and the world entered a new era. Yet, the shadow of those tense decades lingers, a reminder of how a war that never erupted into open conflict still left an indelible mark on history, politics, and international relations. But even with the Cold War officially over, its legacy remains deeply woven into the fabric of the modern world. The world map we know today, NATO, alliances, independent former Soviet states, and global power struggles, was shaped by those tense decades. Many conflicts we see now trace their roots back to the ideological divisions and political strategies forged during the Cold War era. The collapse of the Soviet Union left the United States standing as the world's sole superpower, and for a moment, it seemed like peace and cooperation might finally prevail. But the vacuum left behind created new uncertainties new rivalries, and new forms of power. Nuclear weapons did not disappear. Thousands still exist, locked away in bunkers and submarines around the world, silent reminders of how close humanity came to the edge. The doctrine of mutually assured destruction, which once prevented war, remains a chilling concept even today. The Cold War also changed science and technology forever. Satellites, global communication, computers, and the birth of the internet. Much of it was accelerated by the pressure to outsmart the enemy. Medical research, aviation, education, and even entertainment were shaped by the competition between East and West. And then there's the symbol that came to define the era, the Berlin Wall. For 28 years, it stood as a stark physical manifestation of division, separating families, friends, and an entire nation. When it fell in 1989, the world watched in awe as crowds tore it down piece by piece, celebrating a future filled with hope. It was a moment that signaled the end of an age ruled by fear, suspicion, and silence. A moment that proved humanity could choose unity over destruction. Yet, tensions never fully disappeared. Today, new rivalries and geopolitical battles echo the old Cold War in surprising ways. Cyber warfare, space militarization, global propaganda, and renewed conflicts over influence and ideology. The world still walks a delicate line. But perhaps the greatest lesson of the Cold War is this: power built on fear can push the world to the brink. But diplomacy, communication, and restraint can pull it back. For nearly 50 years, humanity stood under the shadow of nuclear fire, praying it would never fall. And it didn't, not because of luck, but because leaders, soldiers, scientists, and ordinary citizens chose cooperation over annihilation. The Cold War is more than history. It is a warning. A reminder of what nations can achieve when they compete, and what they risk when they stop listening to each other. A war that never exploded, but shaped every life on Earth. A silent battle that ended without victory celebrations, yet changed humanity's path forever. And though the Cold War officially ended in 1991, its echoes still shape the world we live in today. The alliances formed during those tense decades remain active, influencing global politics, security decisions, and international relationships. Modern conflicts, cyber warfare, economic sanctions, and diplomatic standoffs all trace their roots back to Cold War strategy. The competition for influence never truly disappeared. It simply changed shape, moving from nuclear missiles to information, technology, and global power. Nations continue to guard their borders and their secrets. Intelligence agencies still operate in silence, and military forces remain armed, ready for threats that might never come. The world still holds its breath when tensions rise, aware of the fragile balance that keeps peace intact. The lessons of the Cold War continue to remind us that peace is not guaranteed. It must be protected. It showed what happens when fear overpowers dialogue, and how easily distrust can divide humanity. Yet it also proved that courage, diplomacy, and understanding can break walls that once seemed unbreakable. It demonstrated that even the deepest rivalries can be resolved, and that nations can choose cooperation instead of destruction. Today, the Cold War lives on as a powerful chapter of human history, not just a story of conflict, but a testament to survival. a warning of what could have been, and a guide to what must never happen again. Because in the end, the greatest victory was not won on any battlefield, but in the decision to step back from the brink and preserve the future. This was the Cold War, a silent storm that reshaped the world without ever firing a shot.